My name is Mia, and I'm 26, living in a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. For years, I've been the quiet backbone of my family, covering bills, fixing broken pipes, and filling the fridge, all while balancing a full-time job at a small accounting firm. It's not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on and the water running, things my parents Rita and Frank rarely acknowledge. Last Christmas Eve, the apartment felt colder than usual despite the rattling old heater groaning against the winter chill. I came home late exhausted from a 10-hour shift, my coat still heavy with the scent of old coffee and cheap printer ink. The living room flickered with the uneven glow of Christmas lights we've used since I was a teenager, half the bulbs already dead. My younger brother Liam was hunched over his phone on the worn-out couch, a plate of reheated pizza balancing on his knee. He's 18, fresh out of high school, and the only person in this house who still looks at me without thinly veiled resentment. My mother was in the kitchen setting down a pan of overcooked ham. My father Frank sat at the head of the table, his chair angled just right to avoid catching my eye. I set my purse down, the clinking of my keys sounding like a death knell in the silence. We sat around the rickety table, the room filled with the hollow clatter of forks against chipped plates and the faint strains of a distant radio playing some half-forgotten carol. I managed a small smile at Liam, who forced a grin back, his eyes darting nervously between me and our parents. Then, like a crack of thunder, my father's knife clanged against his plate. My head snapped up, my fork freezing mid-air. "Mia," he said, his tone-sharp eyes narrowed like a judge about to deliver a harsh sentence. "You need to move out." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The heater rattled in the corner, the only thing breaking the icy silence that followed. I blinked, my mind struggling to process the words. My mother's eyes darted away, her lips pressing into a tight, colorless line. "Excuse me," I finally managed, my voice a strange hollow echo. "You've been living here too long," he continued, leaning back in his chair, the creak of the old wood amplifying the tension in the room. "It's time for you to go. You're old enough to handle things on your own." My mouth opened, then closed. I had 1,000 things to say, 1,000 reasons why this felt like betrayal, but the words lodged in my throat like jagged stones. I hadn't been living here because I couldn't afford to leave. I stayed because they needed me, because they relied on me. I looked at my mother, hoping for a sign of support, but she only stared down at her untouched plate, her fingers twitching as if resisting the urge to intervene. Liam's fork paused mid-bite, his eyes wide and scared, his face pale under the flickering lights. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You can't be serious." Frank's gaze hardened, his jaw set like a stone carving. "Dead serious. It's time you stop freeloading and stand on your own feet." Freeloading. The word hit me like a slap. I paid the internet bill, the electric bill, the water. I'd picked up groceries when the fridge was empty and covered Liam's school fees when my father lost his job 2 years ago. Without me, this house would be nothing but a cold shell, its walls as silent and cracked as the people inside it. I glanced at Liam, whose face mirrored my own disbelief. He mouthed a silent, "What the hell?" But I just shook my head. I wasn't about to cause a scene, not tonight. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I set my fork down. "Fine," I said, pushing back my chair. The legs scraped against the scuffed linoleum, the sound sharp enough to cut through the thick air. "If that's what you want." My father's mouth twitched, a brief flicker of something like satisfaction crossing his face. My mother still hadn't looked up, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself smaller, invisible. I turned and left the table, ignoring the way the room seemed to contract around me, the shadows stretching long and accusing as I climbed the stairs to my tiny, cluttered bedroom, my sanctuary in a house that had slowly turned into a prison. I shut the door, the click of the latch like the final note of a long, bitter symphony. I didn't cry, I didn't shout. I just pulled my battered suitcase from the closet, the one I'd stuffed under the bed when I moved back in, thinking it would only be for a few months. As I folded my work shirts and tossed my laptop into the bag, a soft knock echoed through the thin wood. I froze, the air suddenly thick and stifling. Mia, Liam's voice was barely a whisper. I opened the door, finding him standing there, his shoulders hunched, his eyes wide and glassy. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, closing the door softly behind him. "Are you really leaving?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. I looked at him, my only real ally in this crumbling house, and managed a tight, bitter smile. "Looks like it. But if you go, who's going to keep the heat on? Who's going to cover the bills?" I sighed, sitting down on the edge of my bed. "I don't know, Liam, but it's not my problem anymore." He sank down beside me, his head bowed, fingers twisting nervously in his lap. "They don't deserve you," he muttered. I put my arm around his shoulders, giving him a squeeze. "Maybe not, but I deserve a life. As I zipped up my suitcase and stood, I felt a strange bitter freedom settling in my chest. I was finally cutting the strings, freeing myself from the invisible chains that had bound me to this place for too long. And as I shut the door behind me, I realized I wasn't just walking out of a house. I was walking away from a life that had long since stopped feeling like my own. The morning after I packed my bags, I barely slept. My room, once a comforting mess of warm blankets and scattered notebooks, now felt like a ghostly shell, every corner echoing with memories I no longer wanted. I shoved my suitcase into the hallway, the wheels scraping against the old wooden floor. The sound felt like an announcement, a final call for anyone who might try to stop me. But no one came. Liam caught me at the top of the stairs, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen, a silent plea written across his face. I paused, the handle of my suitcase digging into my palm. "Don't do this," he whispered. "They'll come around. Just give them time." I forced a small, tired smile. "I've given them years, Liam. Time isn't the issue." He flinched as if I'd struck him. I hated leaving him behind, but I couldn't drag him into my chaos. He still had a year before he could stand on his own, and the last thing I wanted was to leave him without a safety net. I ruffled his hair, trying to lighten the crushing weight in my chest. "I'll still be here for you. Just a call away." He nodded, a stiff, reluctant movement before stepping aside. I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, each thump a heartbeat, a countdown to my freedom. In the living room, my mother sat hunched over the kitchen table, her thin hands clasped tightly together. My father was nowhere in sight, probably nursing his pride in the garage, surrounded by rusty tools and broken promises. Leaving already, my mother's voice was small, almost lost in the hum of the old refrigerator. She didn't turn to look at me, her eyes fixed on the worn linoleum tracing cracks I'd once covered with cheap tape. I paused, the handle of my suitcase icy against my sweating palm. "Yeah, I think it's for the best." Her shoulders trembled, a small, almost imperceptible shiver. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her throat working around words that never came. I waited for an apology, a tearful plea, anything that might make me hesitate, but the silence stretched on, brittle and suffocating. I exhaled slowly, my breath fogging in the chill of the room. Without another word, I turned and stepped through the door, the cold morning air slicing into my skin, a harsh reminder that I was on my own now. The walk to my car felt longer than ever, every step a fresh reminder of what I was leaving behind. The bitter arguments, the cold stares, the crushing weight of unspoken resentment. I threw my suitcase into the back seat, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. As I slid into the driver's seat, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I fished it out, my hand still trembling, and glanced at the screen. "Liam, don't forget me, okay?" My vision blurred for a moment, my grip tightening around the phone. Me never. I started the car, the engine coughing to life like an old smoker, and pulled out of the driveway without looking back. I didn't need one last glance at the sagging roof, the cracked windows, the front door my father had patched with cheap plywood. I had every crack and crevice memorized, every splintered step and creaking hinge, the physical scars of a house that had never truly been a home. I headed straight to my friend Emma's place. She lived alone in a small second-floor apartment a few blocks from my office. She'd once offered me her spare room during a particularly rough patch, and I hoped the invitation still stood. When I pulled up outside her building, my heart pounded so loudly I barely heard the thrum of the engine. I killed the ignition and sat there for a moment, my hands still clenched around the steering wheel, the chill of the December morning seeping into my bones. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my suitcase, double-checking that my laptop and wallet were still inside, and trudged up the narrow, icy steps. I hesitated at her door, my fist hovering an inch from the chipped wood. I knocked twice, the sound echoing down the quiet hallway. For a second, I thought about turning around, about driving to the edge of the city and never looking back, but then the door creaked open and Emma's familiar freckled face appeared. Mia, she blinked in surprise, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail, a flour-dusted apron tied around her waist. The warm, yeasty smell of fresh bread wafted from behind her, wrapping me in an unexpected, comforting embrace. I tried to smile, but my face felt stiff, my lips cracking in the cold. "Hey, Em, is that spare room still open?" Her eyes widened for a moment, then softened with understanding. Without a word, she reached out, pulled me into a tight hug, and stepped aside to let me in. "Stay as long as you need," she murmured into my shoulder, her arms warm and steady around me. As I crossed the threshold into her tiny but inviting apartment, I felt something break loose inside me, a knot of tension I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. For the first time in years, I felt the faintest flicker of hope, a spark in the darkness, small but steady. Settling into Emma's apartment felt strange, like stepping into a life I'd only ever dreamed of. One where the air wasn't thick with tension and every corner didn't hold the ghost of an unspoken argument. Her place was small, just 2 rooms and a narrow kitchen that barely fit 2 people side by side, but it felt warm, safe. That first night, Emma made us a simple dinner. Pasta tossed in olive oil and garlic with a bottle of cheap red wine she insisted we finish. We ate on the couch, our legs curled under us, the TV murmuring some old sitcom we weren't really watching. She didn't press me for details, didn't demand a dramatic retelling of my escape. She just listened as I spoke in fits and starts, the words tumbling out between bites of overcooked spaghetti. I told her about the dinner, my father's cold, unflinching demand that I leave my mother's silent, complicit stare, and Liam's desperate, fearful eyes. By the time I reached the part where I had driven away without a backward glance, Emma's hand had found mine. Her fingers warm and steady, an unspoken promise that I wasn't alone anymore. That night, as I lay on her living room couch, wrapped in an old plaid blanket that smelled faintly of vanilla and clean laundry, I stared at the ceiling, letting the muffled sounds of traffic drift through the cracked window. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, I woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the soft clatter of mugs. Emma was already up, her hair a wild tangle around her face as she poured steaming cups of coffee into mismatched ceramic mugs. "Morning," she said, pushing one toward me as I stumbled into the kitchen, my eyes still heavy with sleep. "Thanks," I mumbled, wrapping my hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep into my frozen fingers. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only exists between people who have seen each other at their absolute worst and still stick around. So she said eventually, leaning back against the kitchen counter, her eyes sharp despite the early hour. "What's your plan?" I blinked, my mind still foggy from a night of restless sleep. "Plan?" She raised an eyebrow, her lips quirking into a half smile. "Yeah, you can't just camp out on my couch forever. What's the game plan?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, the bitter liquid biting at my tongue, and let the question sink in. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. I'd been so focused on getting out, on breaking free from the suffocating grip of my parents' expectations, that I hadn't considered what came next. I don't know," I admitted, my voice small and uncertain. Emma crossed her arms, tilting her head like a coach sizing up a nervous player. "All right, first things first, do you have enough money to cover rent for a bit? Groceries? You're not about to go broke on me, are you?" I managed a weak laugh. "No, I'm good. I've been saving for a while. Just didn't expect to use it this soon." She nodded, satisfied. "Good, then start small. Find a place, something you can afford without draining your savings. You don't need a palace, just a space that's yours." Her words hit me like a splash of cold water, the fog in my brain clearing just a little. She was right. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet to find a place where I didn't have to tiptoe around my own existence. "Yeah," I said slowly, feeling a flicker of determination ignite in my chest. "Yeah, I can do that." Emma grinned, raising her mug in a mock toast. "Damn right you can." Over the next few days, I threw myself into the task of finding an apartment. I spent my lunch breaks scrolling through rental listings, my evenings on the phone with landlords, my weekends trudging through cramped studios and basement flats that smelled like mildew and regret. It wasn't glamorous. Most of the places I could afford were tiny windowless boxes tucked into the forgotten corners of the city, but I refused to let the grim reality dampen my newfound sense of freedom. Finally, after a week of near misses and dead-end viewings, I found a place that felt right. It was a small 1-bedroom in an aging brick building on the edge of the city, its walls scuffed and floors creaking, but it had a big south-facing window that let in a warm golden light in the mornings. I signed the lease without hesitation, my heart pounding in my chest as I scrawled my name across the dotted line. The day I moved in, Emma helped me carry my few possessions up the narrow, echoing stairwell, our breath misting in the cold air. We dragged my battered suitcase, my secondhand microwave, and a few mismatched pieces of furniture up 3 flights of stairs, our laughter ringing off the cracked plaster walls. When we finally collapsed on the bare, dusty floor of my new living room, Emma raised a plastic cup of gas station champagne in a mock toast. "To freedom," she said, her eyes bright and proud. "To freedom," I echoed, my heart swelling with a strange, unfamiliar warmth. As I lay on my new mattress that night, my body aching from the move, I stared up at the cracked ceiling, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. I had taken the first step, had clawed my way out of the darkness that had held me for so long. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I might actually be okay. I settled into my tiny apartment with a sense of cautious optimism. The walls were thin and the radiator clanged like a haunted drum at night, but it was mine. Every creak in the floor, every draft through the crooked window, it all felt like freedom. The first few days were a blur of unpacking, arranging my few pieces of secondhand furniture, and getting used to the strange echoing silence that filled the space when I wasn't blasting music to drown out my own thoughts. I was learning how to exist without the constant background noise of family tension, without the suffocating pressure of expectations I never agreed to. One evening, as I folded my last box into a flat, crumpled mess, my phone buzzed on the counter. I grabbed it expecting a message from Emma, but froze when I saw Liam's name on the screen. Liam, Mom's been acting weird. Keeps pacing around the house muttering about bills and the water heater. Dad's just sulking in the garage. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I hadn't heard a word from my parents since I left, hadn't even considered how my absence might affect them. I'd cut my financial ties to the house, canceling the automatic payments for the internet, water, and gas as soon as I'd signed my lease. For a moment I felt a pang of guilt, a sharp twist in my chest, but it passed quickly, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They had thrown me out, had told me to find my own way. I was just giving them what they wanted. Me, they'll figure it out. His response came almost immediately. Liam, I don't think they can. They're falling apart without you. I set my phone down, staring at the cracked ceiling as the realization sank in. My family, the people who had pushed me out on a freezing Christmas Eve, couldn't handle life without the daughter they'd treated like an inconvenience. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did neither. I just sat there, my hands gripping the edge of the counter, my heart pounding with a strange, bitter satisfaction. A few days later, as I was settling into my morning routine, coffee brewing on the chipped countertop, the toaster wheezing to life with a puff of smoke, my phone buzzed again. Mom, Mia, the internet is down. Can you call the company and fix it? I blinked at the screen, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. I couldn't believe the audacity. After everything, she still thought I would handle their problems like some sort of unpaid live-in technician. I typed my response carefully, each word a small act of rebellion. Me, sorry, not my problem anymore. The three dots blinked for a long time before her reply finally came. Mom, don't be like that. We need you. I felt a cold, sharp anger slice through my chest, a hot, stinging rush that left my fingers trembling. I set the phone down, forcing myself to take a deep breath. I had promised myself I wouldn't let them drag me back into their chaos, that I would stand firm this time. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Liam. I almost didn't answer, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but guilt won out and I pressed the green icon. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual as I leaned against the kitchen counter. Mia, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling line. Dad's losing it. The power just got shut off and he's blaming you. I felt my pulse quicken, my heart thudding painfully against my ribs. What? Why? Because he knows you were the one paying the bills. He's furious, throwing things around, saying you've abandoned the family. I closed my eyes, my hand tightening around the phone. I had expected some backlash, but not this. Not the raw, unfiltered rage I could hear in Liam's shaky breaths. Listen, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. This isn't my fault. I had to leave. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for them. I know, he whispered, his voice breaking, but it's a mess here. They're falling apart. I felt a pang of guilt, a sharp twisting pain that spread through my chest. I hated the thought of Liam being caught in the crossfire, of him suffering because I had finally chosen myself over the family I'd spent years trying to support. Just hang in there, I whispered, pressing the phone tighter against my ear, as if I could somehow reach through the crackling line and pull him out of that suffocating house. As soon as you graduate, you can get out too. I'll help you. He didn't respond right away, and for a moment I thought the call had dropped, but then I heard a quiet, broken "Thanks, Mia." I hung up, my hands shaking as I set the phone down on the counter. I felt like a traitor, like I had abandoned the one person in that house who had ever truly cared about me. But I couldn't go back. I wouldn't. That night, as I lay on my mattress, the cool city air drifting in through the cracked window, I realized that my freedom had come at a higher cost than I'd expected. I had cut myself free, but the chains still clinked faintly in the darkness, their echoes haunting me as I stared into the shadowed corners of my tiny new world. A week after that tense call with Liam, I started to notice the cracks in my new life. At first, it was little things. The flicker of paranoia when my phone buzzed, the chill that crept up my spine every time I checked my mail and found nothing but bills and flyers. But then the messages started. It began with a string of missed calls from my mother, her name flashing angrily on my screen at all hours of the day. I ignored them, letting each ring out until my voicemail was a graveyard of half-mumbled apologies and broken pleas. Then one evening, as I was trying to unwind with a glass of cheap wine and an old sitcom rerun, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Liam. I picked up immediately, my heart already racing. "Liam," I said, pressing the phone tightly to my ear. "What's going on?" "Mia," he whispered, his voice a strained, breathless rasp. "Dad found out you shut off the utilities. He's furious. He tried to break into your bank account." I froze, the wine glass slipping from my fingers and shattering against the edge of the counter. Red wine splattered across the linoleum, spreading like a slow-motion bloodstain. What I whispered, my pulse thundering in my ears. "I saw him," Liam continued, his voice shaking. "He was going through Mom's old notebook, the one where she used to write down everyone's passwords. He's convinced you owe him for abandoning the family." My knees buckled and I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Did he get in?" I croaked, my mind racing through the nightmare scenarios. Drained accounts, ruined credit, years of hard work stolen in a single vindictive act. "No," Liam said quickly, his words tumbling over each other in his rush to reassure me. "I think he tried, but he messed up the login too many times. I got an alert on my phone that there was a failed login attempt from his laptop." I let out a shaky breath, my head spinning with a mixture of relief and mounting fury. "Thanks for telling me, Liam," I said, my voice tight. "I'll handle it." I hung up without another word, my fingers immediately flying over my phone screen as I logged into my banking app. I changed my password, activated two-factor authentication, and set up alerts for any future login attempts. I felt like I was building a fortress brick by brick around the fragile new life I had barely begun to piece together. But as I stared at the glowing screen, my reflection distorted in the cracked glass, I realized I was also building walls around my heart, locking out the last threads of loyalty I had once felt for my parents. The next morning, I woke to a flood of messages. Half a dozen from Liam, a handful of missed calls from my mother, and a single chilling text from an unknown number. "Unknown, you think you can just walk away? You'll regret this." I stared at the message, my blood turning to ice. I didn't need to guess who had sent it. I knew the twisted, self-righteous tone all too well. I deleted the text without responding, my fingers trembling as I blocked the number. I felt like a hunted animal cornered in my tiny, drafty apartment, every shadow suddenly alive with threat. Emma noticed my distraction that night when she came over for our weekly pasta dinner. She set down the pot of overcooked spaghetti with a clatter, her eyes narrowing as she took in my pale face and shaking hands. "Mia," she said sharply, folding her arms across her chest, "what's going on?" I tried to force a smile, but it felt brittle, like a cheap mask that would crack if she looked too closely. "Nothing," I said, my voice thin and unconvincing. She snorted, grabbing my phone off the counter before I could stop her. Her eyes flicked over the message notifications, her jaw tightening as she scrolled through the missed calls and frantic texts. "Jesus, Mia," she muttered, tossing the phone back onto the counter. "Why didn't you tell me they were harassing you?" I shrugged, suddenly feeling small and stupid, like a child caught in a lie. "I didn't want to drag you into it. It's my mess to clean up." Emma rolled her eyes, grabbing my shoulders and giving me a rough shake. "Stop that. You don't have to do this alone. You're not their punching bag anymore." I felt my throat tighten, a lump rising that I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge until now. "I know," I whispered, my eyes burning, "but it's hard to break the habit." She sighed, pulling me into a tight hug, her chin digging into my shoulder. "You're stronger than this, Mia. Don't let them pull you back in." As I clung to her, my fingers digging into the worn fabric of her sweater, I felt something inside me shift, a small trembling piece of my heart finally breaking free from the chains I had wrapped around it. When she pulled back, her eyes were fierce, her hands still gripping my shoulders like she was afraid I might bolt. "If they try anything else," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "you let me know. We'll handle it together." I managed a small grateful nod, the tightness in my chest easing just a little. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. The text messages didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. The unknown number kept popping up on my screen at all hours, the messages growing more frantic, more desperate, and then eventually more threatening. Unknown. "You can't run from your family. Blood is thicker than water." Unknown. "You owe us, Mia. You don't get to just walk away." Unknown. "You'll regret turning your back on us." Each message felt like a fresh slap, a reminder of the chains I had fought so hard to break. But I didn't reply. I refused to give him the satisfaction. Then one chilly Thursday morning, just as I was rushing out the door for work, I froze. My car, the old beat-up sedan I'd saved for months to buy, wasn't parked in its usual spot. My heart dropped, a cold, sickening feeling spreading through my chest. I ran down the cracked concrete steps, my breath fogging in the freezing air, and frantically scanned the street. Gone. I spun around, my mind racing. Had it been towed, stolen? But then I noticed something. A scrap of paper fluttering on the ground near where my car had been. I snatched it up, my fingers numb and trembling. Enjoy walking. My blood turned to ice. There was only one person who would leave a note like that, who would have the gall to sabotage my escape like this. I stumbled back up the stairs, my mind spinning with anger and fear. I slammed my apartment door shut behind me, my heart racing as I grabbed my phone and dialed Emma's number with shaking hands. Emma. I gasped when she picked up, her voice still groggy from sleep. He took my car. My dad, he took my car. There was a brief stunned silence on the other end, followed by a burst of curses so creative I almost managed a bitter laugh. Stay put, she said, her tone suddenly sharp and focused. I'm coming over. Within 20 minutes she was pounding on my door, her breath fogging in the icy hallway. I let her in, my hands still trembling as I replayed the nightmare scenario in my mind. All right, she said, yanking off her coat and tossing it onto the couch. First things first, you need to file a police report. Theft. I don't care if it's your dad, you can't let him get away with this. I hesitated, the old familiar guilt rising in my throat like bile. But it's my dad. What if they don't take me seriously? Emma's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. Mia, listen to me. You don't owe him anything. Not after everything he's put you through. He crossed a line and you need to stand up for yourself. I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding in my ears. She was right. I had to stop letting fear and guilt control me. I grabbed my laptop, my fingers still trembling as I logged into my insurance account, double-checking that my car was registered in my name. It was. I pulled up the GPS tracking app I had installed months ago, my heart leaping when I saw the small blinking dot moving slowly across the map. He's driving it, I whispered, my eyes glued to the screen. He's actually driving it. Emma leaned over my shoulder, her eyes darkening as she watched the tiny dot creep through the familiar streets of my old neighborhood. Call the police? She said, her voice low and steady. Right now. My hands shook as I dialed the number, my heart racing as I stumbled through the automated prompts. Finally, a calm professional voice came on the line and I forced myself to speak. Yes, I'd like to report a stolen vehicle, I said, my voice tight and unsteady. It's my car, but my father took it without my permission. I can see it moving on the GPS tracker right now. The operator took my information, her tone brisk but understanding, and promised to send officers to the address I provided. I hung up, my heart still racing, my mind spinning with 100 worst-case scenarios. What if he gets away? I whispered, my eyes still glued to the blinking dot on the screen. He won't, Emma said firmly, her hand resting on my shoulder. We won't let him. It felt like hours, but it was probably only 20 minutes before my phone buzzed again. I snatched it up, my pulse thundering in my ears. Ms. Turner, a deep authoritative voice crackled through the speaker. This is Officer Perez. We've recovered your vehicle. Your father is in custody. I sank onto the couch, my knees suddenly too weak to hold me. Oh, thank God. There will be paperwork to fill out. The officer continued, his tone polite but firm. You can pick up your vehicle at the station. We'll need you to come down to make a statement. I thanked him, my voice trembling with relief, and hung up my head, spinning with a mixture of shock and exhaustion. Emma grinned, pulling me into a tight hug. See, I told you, you're stronger than this. I managed a shaky laugh, clinging to her as the tension slowly drained from my body. That night, as I lay in bed, my car safely parked outside, I realized something. I had finally broken free. I had taken back my power, my life, my freedom. And no matter what my father tried, he would never control me again. The next morning, as I sat at my tiny kitchen table, the weak winter sunlight streaming through the dirty window, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs, and reached for my phone. I typed out a single message to Liam, my fingers trembling but steady. Me, I'm here for you whenever you're ready to break free too. As I hit send, I felt a small, fierce spark ignite in my chest, a promise to myself that I would never go back. I had chosen myself, and for the first time that felt like enough. Story 2. My name is Ivy, and when I turned 18, my life split in two before and after the check. Growing up in a quiet town in Oregon, my life always revolved around being the shadow behind my older brother Chase. He was the star of our family, the loud, charming one with a revolving list of expensive hobbies, guitar, dirt bikes, gaming rigs, photography. Whatever he wanted, my parents handed over with a smile and an open wallet. Me. I got hand-me-down notebooks, Target birthday cards, and the kind of parental attention that felt more like obligation than love. I wasn't bitter, not then, just used to it. So when my parents Julia and Tom suddenly asked me if I wanted a party for my 18th birthday, I was confused. It wasn't like them. I'd never had a real party. No friends over, no cake bigger than a dinner plate. Chase got blowouts every year full of cousins and custom themes. My birthdays were usually a quiet dinner if that, but this time they were serious. "We want to celebrate you," Mom said, folding laundry with fake casualness. 18 is a big deal, Dad added. I didn't buy it, not at first, but I went along with it curious. They started planning like it was a wedding. Calls to caterers, new patio furniture, even balloons ordered from out of state. And every day they seemed a little more on edge, whispering when they thought I couldn't hear. Then I heard the name that explained everything, Grandma Evelyn. She lived in Boston and didn't visit often. She also happened to be the only person in our family who ever treated me like I mattered. Her opinion carried weight, especially because she had money. A lot of it. She'd helped my parents out a few times when Chase's business ventures started crashing. And apparently she was coming to the party. Suddenly it all made sense. They weren't throwing this party for me, they were staging a performance. Trying to prove to Grandma that they treated me well. Playing the role of loving, balanced parents. Probably hoping to keep that financial lifeline alive. Whatever. I told myself I'd fake it too. Smile, play nice, and enjoy what little attention came my way. When the day finally came, I woke up early and saw Grandma's little silver Prius pulling into the driveway. I ran downstairs to greet her. She wrapped me in a hug that smelled like lavender and old books, her arms firm but warm. "There's my Ivy," she beamed. "Look at you, a grown woman already." We sat and caught up chatting about college acceptances and her dog that hated thunderstorms. Then guests started arriving, family, neighbors, a couple of my classmates, and the backyard filled with small talk and paper plates. Everyone kept asking where Chase was. Mom gave the same answer every time. "Oh, he's just tied up with his company. He'll swing by later." I didn't hold my breath. The party was decent. For once the spotlight was on me, but I could tell who it was really for. My parents hovered around Grandma like bees to honey, refilling her drink every 5 minutes and laughing too hard at her jokes. Then somewhere between burgers and cake, Grandma stood up and tapped her glass with a fork. "I want to say something." The backyard quieted down fast. "Ivy," she began, "I've watched you grow into a smart, kind, responsible young woman. You never complain, you never expect much, and you've worked hard for everything you've achieved." She paused and looked at my parents, who froze like mannequins. "I know you've been accepted to a few colleges, and I know one of them, Meriden, has been your dream for years." My throat tightened. I hadn't even told her how much I wanted to go there. The tuition was too high and I assumed it was out of reach. "Well," she said, smiling and pulling a white envelope from her purse, "I'd like to help." I opened the envelope slowly, my hands shaking. Inside was a check for $100,000. The backyard went completely silent. Then someone gasped, and then the cheering started. But all I could do was stare at it, stunned. I hugged her, barely able to speak. "Thank you, Grandma. You have no idea what this means." She just patted my back. "I think I do." From the corner of my eye, I saw my parents. They weren't clapping. Their smiles were thin and forced. Their eyes were locked on the check in my hands like it was a live grenade. The rest of the night went by in a blur. Guests left, cake was boxed up, and Grandma stayed the night in our guest room. She was leaving early the next morning, but promised to call soon and help with college planning. It should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it was the beginning of the fallout. The next morning, Grandma left before breakfast. I waved as her car disappeared down the street, feeling the weight of the envelope in my pocket like a secret weapon. By dinner time, Chase finally showed up. No hug, no card, no congratulations. Just a quick grunt of happy birthday before he made a beeline for the fridge. He looked rough, designer clothes, wrinkled phone, constantly buzzing, dark circles under his eyes. We sat at the table in awkward silence until Dad cleared his throat. "Ivy, we need to talk." I looked up, already knowing this wasn't going to be good. "It's about your brother," Mom said. "His business is in trouble," Dad continued. "He took some loans, bad timing with the market, and now the banks want repayment." I stayed quiet, waiting. "We think," Dad said slowly, "it would make sense to use that money Grandma gave you to help him out." The words dropped like a bomb. "You want me to give Chase my college money?" "You already have a full scholarship to state," Mom chimed in. "You'll still be going to college. And Chase needs it more than you right now," Dad added. I laughed. I couldn't help it. "This money is for me to go to Meriden." Chase rolled his eyes. "It's not even about the school. You're being selfish. I'm trying to build something real here." I looked around the table. "You're all serious, aren't you?" Mom leaned in. "Family helps family. That's what we've always taught you." No, I said, standing up. You taught me that Chase gets everything and I get leftovers. Then Dad lost it. His chair scraped back and he grabbed my arm hard. You're not leaving this table until you come to your senses. I pulled away. Touch me again and I'll call Grandma. That shut him up. I went upstairs, locked my door, and cried until I couldn't anymore. But by sunrise I had a plan. By the time the sun was stretching light across my room, I wasn't crying anymore. I was packing. Not loudly, not like a dramatic exit from a movie. Just slow, steady movements. My laptop went into my backpack first, then my important documents, birth certificate, student ID, social security card, all tucked into a folder. I added 2 changes of clothes, some toiletries, and the check. I folded it into a book just in case. My heart wasn't racing, I wasn't scared, I was just done. They thought I'd fold like always, but this time felt different. This time I had a way out. It was still early. The house was quiet. I avoided the 3rd stair from the top. It creaked and slipped into the kitchen. I grabbed granola bars, a water bottle, and my phone charger. As I stepped out the back door, I took one last look at the house I'd grown up in. Every corner of it had held me back, kept me small. I wasn't angry anymore, just ready to leave it all behind. The bus stop was 5 blocks away and the air was sharp and cool. I wrapped my hoodie tighter and kept walking. I didn't check my phone until I reached the Greyhound station. 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 from Chase, 5 from Dad. I ignored them all. I bought a ticket to Boston. Grandma Evelyn hadn't expected me, but I knew she'd understand. She always had. By the time I got to her place, it was nearly sunset. Her house stood like a beacon, small but proud, wrapped in ivy and blooming with late summer flowers. I stood at her door, suddenly unsure, but then it opened. Ivy. She didn't sound surprised, just concerned. I stepped inside and everything spilled out: the dinner, the confrontation, the threat, the bruises on my wrist where Dad had grabbed me. I pulled up my sleeve and watched her eyes darken like a coming storm. He said if I told you they'd disown me, I said quietly. Grandma didn't speak right away. She just picked up her phone, dialed, and put it on speaker. My dad answered on the 3rd ring. Mom, Ivy's there. Thank God she... Don't, Grandma cut him off. I've heard everything. I know about Chase's debt. I know you tried to take Ivy's college fund. I know what you did. She's lying. She has the bruises, Tom. There was silence. You threatened your own daughter to protect your son's mess, she said. You've done enough. I'm cutting all financial support. From this day forward, you're on your own. She's turning you against us. No, you did that all by yourself. She hung up, gently set the phone on the table, and looked at me. You're staying here, she said, her voice firm as a mountain. Until college starts, until you're ready. Whatever you need. That night I slept in her guest room under a quilt she'd made years ago. I cried again, but this time from relief. For the first time in my life I felt safe. The next few weeks passed in peace. Every morning I'd wake up to the smell of coffee and fresh muffins. Grandma had this quiet way of making things feel normal even when everything had just exploded. We filled our days with small things: grocery runs, walks through the park, baking pies. I helped her around the house, fixed her printer, and even taught her how to stream old westerns on her tablet. She never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. She just made space. My parents kept trying to reach me. First there were the calls, then texts. Come home. This is ridiculous. You're tearing this family apart. Chase's situation is getting worse. We all need to sacrifice. I blocked them. Then came the emails. One from Mom said, you're being cruel. Your brother is suffering, and you're just running away. But I wasn't running. I was choosing myself for once. In early August, we packed up Grandma's car and made the 3-hour drive to Meriden College. The campus was beautiful, tree-lined paths, historic brick buildings, and students buzzing around with excitement. My dorm room was small but perfect. My roommate Raina seemed sweet and had a giant suitcase filled with snacks. Grandma made my bed and insisted on organizing my closet. She placed the checkbook inside my lockbox and kissed my forehead. You call me if you need anything, even if it's just to hear someone say they're proud of you. I hugged her tight. You already gave me everything I needed. She left that afternoon, waving until her car disappeared around the corner. I watched her go, then sat down on my bed and took a breath. I had made it. College was hard at first. I was used to being invisible now. I had professors who asked for my opinions, classmates who wanted to study together, and group chats full of people planning game nights and midnight pizza runs. I joined the campus newsletter and started writing. I even submitted an essay about family for an ethics class, and the professor read it aloud, tears in his eyes. I was becoming someone I liked, but the quiet didn't last long. Halfway through September, I got a visit from my dorm RA. "Your parents are downstairs," she said. "They're asking for you." I felt my stomach flip. I hadn't seen them since the night I left. I found them in the campus cafe sitting side by side like they were still trying to look like a united front. But they looked older, worn down, like the consequences were catching up. Ivy Mom started reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "We just want to talk," Dad said. "Then talk." They looked at each other, then back at me. "We were wrong," Mom said. "We shouldn't have asked for the money. We shouldn't have threatened you." "We lost everything," Dad added. "Chase defaulted on his loans. We've been covering his debts. We're underwater now." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. They paused. "We were hoping," Mom said slowly, "that maybe you'd talk to your grandmother. Not to give us money, just help us reconnect." I almost laughed. "You want me to fix your relationship with her? We know we messed up, but she's cutting us off completely." "She should." Dad flinched. "Ivy, we're still your parents." "I remember. Just like I remember how fast you were willing to throw me away for Chase." Silence. I stood up, grabbed my bag. "If you want forgiveness, try being different, but don't use me to get to her. That door closed when you tried to steal my future." I left them sitting there, too stunned to argue. Weeks later, Aunt Jenna called. She'd always been neutral, but she sounded urgent. "Ivy, Chase's business is bankrupt. Your parents are draining their retirement to keep him from going under. They're talking about selling the house." I didn't say anything. She sighed. "Just thought you should know." That night, Grandma called. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the sadness underneath. "They showed up at my house today, begging. Told me they're about to lose everything." "What did you say?" I said no. Told them it was time to stand on their own, and that if they'd treated you like a daughter, none of this would have happened. I didn't cry this time. I just said thank you. The fall semester passed with more peace than I ever thought possible. My days were filled with books discussions, early morning coffee runs, and late-night walks across campus with new friends. The kind of peace that comes when you no longer live for someone else's approval. My professors encouraged my writing. One of them even submitted my essay about surviving family betrayal to a national student competition. I didn't win, but I got an honorable mention. That was enough. Someone had seen my voice and thought it mattered. That never happened back home. Raina and I had become close, the kind of quiet friendship where you don't need to talk all the time to feel understood. She didn't ask too many questions about my family. When she did, it wasn't to pry, it was because she cared. I had learned to let people care. One afternoon, I stopped by the post office on campus and found a letter in my mailbox. Real handwriting, no return address. It was from Chase. Just seeing his name made my throat tighten. "Ivy, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I messed up. A lot. But I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because things went wrong, but because I was part of why they did. Mom and Dad always protected me. I let them. I used them. And I used you too. I told myself your money would fix my problems, but deep down I knew it would only buy me more time to fail again. I don't know if we'll ever be okay, but I hope someday you'll believe I mean it when I say I'm sorry, Chase." I sat on the bench outside the student union holding the letter in my hands for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. But I didn't throw it away either. Later that week, I met Grandma Evelyn for lunch in the city. She looked sharp in her navy coat, silver hair swept up neatly like always. We found a small cafe on a quiet street, the kind with real tablecloths and fresh flowers in glass jars. "I saw Chase's letter," I told her. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, and, I don't know, I think he's trying. Or maybe he's just trying to feel better. Grandma stirred her tea. "Maybe both can be true." I nodded. "But I'm not going back. I'm not forgiving everything just because someone says sorry. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not theirs to control." She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled, small and proud. "You found your center." By winter, news started reaching me more often. Aunt Jenna texted occasionally with updates, careful not to overstep. "They sold the house. Chase is living in a shared apartment. Your mom took a cashier job. Your dad's delivering packages." They were surviving barely, but they were finally standing on their own. And somehow that was the closure I didn't know I needed. When spring came, I got an unexpected invitation. A wedding. Raina's older sister was getting married, and she had invited me as her +1. I bought a simple dress with my campus job savings and spent the weekend with Raina's family, loud, warm, messy people who argued over who made the best tamales and passed down stories like songs. On the second night, Raina's uncle asked, "Where's your family from?" And I paused, unsure what to say. "They're still finding themselves," I said finally, and he nodded like he understood more than I gave him credit for. That summer, Grandma helped me land an internship at a publishing house. Small, local, mostly nonfiction, but they gave me real assignments. I edited drafts, sat in on story pitches, even helped proof the print layout for a new biography. The editor-in-chief, a quiet woman named Beatrice, told me over coffee one day, "You've got a steady pen. Clean, thoughtful. Like someone who's had to be careful with their voice for a long time." I smiled and just said I've had practice. At the end of my second year, I made a decision. One that I hadn't seen coming. I wrote a piece about my story. Not for a class, not for therapy, just for myself. Then I submitted it anonymously to a podcast that featured personal essays. 3 months later, I got an email. "We want to feature your story in our next series. Are you willing to read it aloud?" I said yes. Recording day came. I wore a plain sweater, jeans, and my grandmother's silver ring. I sat behind a microphone in a dim booth and read my story about a girl who was told her dreams were less important than someone else's mistakes, about how she walked away even when it hurt, about the grandmother who gave her more than money, she gave her a way out. When I finished reading, there was silence. The producer spoke through the headset. That was powerful, and I realized something right then. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a story for anyone who's ever been told to be quiet, to be small, to sacrifice without being seen. A story that said, you can leave. You can begin again. You are allowed. I never moved back home. By the time I graduated, I had a job lined up with the same publishing house. Grandma cried at my ceremony, her hands shaking when she hugged me. "You were born with strong roots," she said, holding my face, "but you grew your own wings." Chase and I keep in touch occasionally. Quiet messages, birthdays, the occasional meme. He's working at a mechanic shop now. He seems steadier. Maybe we'll sit down one day and talk about it all. Maybe not. As for my parents, we haven't spoken in over 2 years. Sometimes I miss the idea of them more than the people they really were. But I've learned that blood doesn't always mean belonging. That silence isn't peace, and that love without respect is just control dressed up in pretty words. I live in a small apartment now. It's filled with secondhand furniture, fairy lights, and books stacked on every surface. I keep fresh flowers on the windowsill just like Grandma always did. Every Sunday I walk to the farmer's market. I buy pastries and coffee and sit on the bench under the big oak tree. Sometimes I write, sometimes I just watch the world. And I'm okay with both, because I know who I am now, and no one can take that from me. Story 3. I never imagined that a single evening could unravel the carefully woven fabric of my life. At 32, I was a senior manager at a reputable accounting firm in Brooklyn, leading a team I respected and admired. My days were structured, my goals clear, and my solitude a comfort rather than a burden. My younger sister, Emily, 29, was the family's shining star, a celebrated financial analyst on Wall Street, basking in the limelight our parents so eagerly provided. Our parents, Margaret and Thomas, had always been enamored with Emily's achievements. Her accolades were their pride, her success, their validation. In contrast, my milestones, graduating top of my class, securing a prestigious position, leading successful projects, were met with polite nods and fleeting acknowledgments. Family dinners often revolved around Emily's latest triumphs, while my contributions faded into the background. On February 15th, a rainy Thursday evening, I left the office later than usual, engrossed in finalizing an audit report. The streets glistened under the city lights as I made my way to the subway. As I stepped onto the crosswalk, a speeding car ignored the red light, its headlights piercing through the rain. The impact was instantaneous. Pain radiated through my body as I was thrown into the air, landing hard onto the pavement. Darkness enveloped me. I awoke in a hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling my nostrils. A nurse informed me I had suffered multiple fractures, including a broken right leg and internal injuries that required immediate surgery. My body was immobilized, pain pulsating with every breath. The nurse mentioned they had contacted my emergency contacts, my parents. Relief washed over me, believing they would soon be by my side. Shortly after my phone rang, it was my mother. "Sarah, we received the hospital's call." She began, her tone measured. "But tonight is Emily's award ceremony. She's receiving the Analyst of the Year award. It's a significant event for her career." I was stunned. "But I'm about to undergo surgery," I whispered. My father's voice interjected, firm and unyielding. "There are doctors and nurses to care for you. Emily needs our support tonight." The line went dead. Federal Bureau of Investigation +1 GQ +1. Left alone, tears streamed down my face as I stared at the ceiling. The television in the room displayed live coverage of the award ceremony. Emily stood on stage, radiant in a designer gown, our parents beaming with pride in the front row. I lay in a hospital bed, broken and alone, their absence more painful than my injuries. The nurse returned to prepare me for surgery. Noticing my distress, she gently turned off the television. "Your family couldn't make it," she asked softly. I shook my head, unable to speak. She squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We'll take good care of you." As I was wheeled into the operating room, the fluorescent lights above blurred into streaks. I resolved that this moment, this pain would not define me. I would emerge from this stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The surgery marked not just the mending of bones, but the beginning of a transformation. I woke up to soft dawn light spilling into the room, the beeping of the heart monitor slow and steady beside me. The surgery was over. My right leg was in a cast, my abdomen wrapped tight, and my mind still foggy was just beginning to piece things together. The hospital room was quiet except for the low hum of the city beyond the window. I stared at the ceiling, numb and worn down, when my phone buzzed beside me. "Mom!" For a moment I didn't move. I thought about their voices the night before, calm, collected, dismissive, as if my broken bones were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But I answered anyway. "Caroline, are you still at the hospital?" My mother's voice was rushed, unlike yesterday, less polished, more raw. There was noise in the background. I could hear my father's voice, urgent and strained. Something was wrong. "Yes," I said cautiously, "the surgery's done." There was silence on the line and then a sob. "We need to see you, now, it's Emily." My chest tightened. What happened? The answer came not through words but through the television. I turned to the news playing on the small wall-mounted screen. There she was, my sister, still in her designer suit from the night before being led away by police. Wall Street analyst arrested for fraud, accused of embezzling over $20 million. I blinked, unsure if I was dreaming. It felt unreal. The same sister who was accepting an award hours ago was now in handcuffs, surrounded by flashing cameras and panicked murmurs. According to the report, Emily had siphoned millions from client accounts, funding an extravagant lifestyle, international travel, luxury cars, jewelry, all under the radar until now. The door to my room flew open. My parents rushed in. My mother's makeup was smudged, her eyes red and swollen. My father's posture, usually proud and upright, was bent and heavy. "Caroline," my mother whispered, "you have to help her. We need your help." I didn't answer right away. My body still ached, and so did the memories of last night. The award ceremony, the call, the surgery I faced alone. My father spoke next. "We're using the apartment as collateral for bail, but it's not enough. We need your savings. Please. Emily's young, her whole life is ahead of her." "My savings?" I asked, stunned. "You mean the money I saved working 15-hour days, the money I've been putting aside for 10 years? She didn't mean to do this," my mother said quickly. "She got carried away." The room felt colder suddenly, not because of the temperature, but because of how familiar this moment felt, the expectation that I'd quietly give, that I'd clean up the mess as I always had. "I was in surgery last night," I said quietly, "alone. You chose her award over me." "That was different," my father snapped, and I saw the old fire return to his eyes. "This is about family. Are you really going to abandon your sister now?" "Wasn't I abandoned first?" I asked. "Every time you overlooked me, every time you told me to be more like her. You only see me now because you need something." The nurse entered, then gently reminding them, visiting hours weren't until 9 a.m. "We'll come back later," my mother said, standing. "Just think about it." They left. The door clicked shut behind them. I stared at it for a long time. That afternoon, I called James Murphy, our firm's in-house counsel and a close mentor of mine. "I need a legal consultation," I said. "Personal matter." 2 weeks later, I walked into my parents' Upper East Side apartment, leaning slightly on a cane. Murphy was with me, carrying a folder of documents. My parents were waiting in the living room. My mother looked hopeful. My father suspicious. "So you brought a lawyer," he said. "Is that necessary?" I nodded. "Yes, this is a legal matter now." I handed them a copy of the updated charges against Emily. The amount stolen had risen to over $25 million, and the prosecution was uncovering more each day: fraud, tax evasion, even forged documents. "She made choices," I said. "Choices that hurt people." "She's your sister," my mother whispered. "Don't you care?" "I care," I replied calmly, "but I also care about what's right." Murphy laid out the risks. If I gave them the money, it would trigger a financial audit. The source of my savings would be questioned. It could drag me into the investigation. And worst of all, it would make me complicit. "I've already submitted a formal statement," I said. I gave them everything I knew about Emily's past business dealings, including what I saw during family dinners when she boasted about moving money around. My father exploded. "You're going to destroy this family after everything we gave you." "You gave me expectations," I said softly. "You gave me silence. And when I needed you most, you turned away." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. "Please, don't do this." "I'm not the one doing this," I said. "Emily did. You did. I'm just stepping out of the shadow now." When Murphy and I left, I didn't look back. I stepped into the sunlight and exhaled. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. That night, as the city lights twinkled through my bedroom window, I received a call from the district attorney's office. More charges, a stronger case. My mother left me 3 voicemails. I didn't answer any of them. The next morning, Mrs. Johnson was tending her garden again. "Good morning, Caroline," she said kindly. "Spring's coming early this year." I smiled. "I think it is." The sky over Brooklyn was a soft gray the morning I stepped into my new office. It wasn't in Manhattan, not in some shimmering glass tower with a receptionist in heels and marble floors. No, this place was different. Ground floor, brick-walled, tucked on a quiet street near the promenade. A small plaque beside the door read, "Caroline Wilson and Complement Accounting." That was all I needed. Inside, the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and old books. The windows were wide and clean, letting in soft light that warmed the wooden floors. There were no glass walls here, just desks, people, and peace. "Morning, Caroline." "Sarah." My receptionist greeted me with a bright smile as I walked in. "Coffee's on your desk, and you've got a letter from the local women's shelter." "Thanks, Sarah." I took the letter and moved to my corner office where I could still see the tip of Manhattan in the distance. My sister's old world, a skyline that once made me feel small. Now it looked like a memory. I opened the letter. It was a thank you card. Our firm had helped the shelter reorganize their finances and apply for renewed funding. Just a few hours of our time, but to them it had meant everything. That was the kind of work we did now. Small, honest, steady. For nonprofits, for immigrants trying to start businesses, for single parents trying to stay afloat. It felt right. Not long after Mrs. Johnson stopped by, she held out a bouquet, her garden's early spring flowers, deep pinks and soft whites. "It's been 6 months," she said, "since you opened this place." I know, I smiled. "You've been here every step. Always will be." I placed the flowers in a glass vase near the window, right beside a small photograph, my new family. Not bound by blood, but by choice. My staff. Mrs. Johnson. Friends who'd shown up when no one else did. The phone rang. Sarah picked it up, paused and looked at me through the glass. "It's the DA's office," she mouthed. I took the call in my office. A quiet voice on the other end gave me the update. More charges. Sentencing scheduled. 15 years. Emily had finally confessed to everything. I sat back in my chair, eyes on the horizon. There it was again, that strange mix of sadness and relief. A knock came at the door. It was Murphy. "You heard?" I nodded. "Just now." "She's asking to see you." I let the silence settle between us. I said no, I said. He studied my face, nodded once and left. That afternoon, I reviewed a proposal from a young woman named AmITheA, an immigrant baker looking to expand her small shop. I made a few notes, suggested a better tax strategy, and sent it back. Later, Jessica came in with questions on a nonprofit's quarterly report. We worked side by side for a while before she said quietly, "It's kind of amazing what you've built here." I looked around, the hum of printers, the quiet murmur of phones, the warm light from the sun slipping through the blinds. It was all so simple, and yet so full. That night, after the office emptied, I stood on the balcony outside my apartment looking across the East River. The lights of the city shimmered, reflected in the water like distant stars. My phone buzzed. Another message from my mother. I didn't open it. Instead, I reached for the shears and clipped a few dead leaves from my rosemary plant. The breeze carried the scent, clean, earthy, familiar. I breathed it in. At some point in the months after the accident, I'd started living for myself. Not for approval, not for praise, not to prove anything to anyone. Just for the quiet peace of doing good work, helping good people, and growing something of my own. And strangely, that peace had spread. People who once overlooked me were now asking for advice. Former colleagues emailed to ask about joining my firm. Even the local newspaper had written a short profile, "The Quiet Accountant," changing Brooklyn one ledger at a time. I never wanted a spotlight, I just wanted a voice. I stepped back inside, shut the balcony door, and turned off the lights. On the table by the window sat a single envelope unopened, the last letter from Emily. I'd been keeping it for weeks. I didn't hate her, not anymore, but I didn't owe her anything either. Family doesn't begin and end with blood. It's in who shows up when you need them. Who stands beside you, not above you. I picked up the envelope, stared at it, then slid it into the drawer. Not today. Today belonged to me. Tomorrow would too. Outside, spring crept quietly into Brooklyn, the flowers blooming slowly, not for anyone's attention, just because it was time. And so was I.